My daughter-in-law asked me to stay away from her party which she had arranged in my house. Finally, I made her know who was the head. I stood by the large bay window in my living room, staring out at the sprawling garden that stretched toward the horizon. The sun was beginning its lazy descent, casting golden light over the perfectly manicured hedges and the stone pathway leading to the gazebo. The place looked picturesque, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. And yet, despite the beauty around me, there was a sharp knot of frustration sitting heavily in my chest. Today was supposed to be special. I had spent the entire week overseeing preparations, the floral arrangements, the catering, and even the table settings. Every little detail had been planned meticulously, as I always did when hosting an event in my home. Or at least, that was what I thought. Until my daughter-in-law, Claire, came waltzing into the kitchen that morning, a condescending smile plastered across her face, and informed me, with the utmost politeness, that I wasn't needed at the party. Needed. The very word made my blood boil. Claire and my son, Daniel, had been married for just over a year. When they first announced their engagement, I was thrilled. Daniel was my only child, my pride and joy. Naturally, I was eager to welcome his wife into the family with open arms. I had treated her with nothing but kindness, inviting her into my home, offering to help with wedding preparations, and even hosting an elegant reception in my own backyard. But Claire. Well, she made it clear from the beginning that she wasn't interested in being part of my family. She was beautiful, no doubt, a slender, elegant woman with flawless makeup and a taste for designer brands. She spoke softly and smiled sweetly, but beneath her polished facade was a woman who relished subtle cruelty. She had a way of making her words cut deeper with her gentleness, using politeness as a thinly veiled dagger. And today, she wielded it against me with precision. "Rachel," she had said softly, folding her manicured hands together as she stood before me in the kitchen. "I just want you to know that the party tonight is very personal. It's more of a young crowd thing. You understand, right? It might be better if you sat this one out." Her words were spoken gently, like she was doing me a favor, sparing me from some grand inconvenience. She even patted my hand as though she were addressing an elderly woman who needed to be coddled. In my own house. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to tell her that I had planned countless parties in this very home before she even learned how to apply mascara. That this house, my house, was not just some venue she could commandeer as she pleased, but I didn't say any of that. I simply smiled, a smile so tight it made my cheeks ache, and nodded. "Of course, dear," I murmured. "I wouldn't want to intrude." Oh, but I would. By the time the party started, I was seething quietly in my room. The house was buzzing with laughter and music. I could hear the sound of corks popping, followed by the delicate clinking of champagne flutes. The scent of roasted lamb and freshly baked hors d'oeuvres drifted up from the kitchen. The faint strains of music thumped through the walls, too loud, too energetic for a casual party. I walked over to the large mirror by my dresser and stared at my reflection. My face was calm, but my eyes were sharp with barely contained fury. I had worn a simple cream blouse and navy slacks, not expecting to attend, but as I looked at my reflection, I made a decision. I was done being dismissed. I slipped on a sleek, elegant black dress, the kind that made a statement without being garish. It fit me perfectly, highlighting my slender figure and exuding quiet authority. I clasped on a delicate diamond necklace, subtle but commanding. I added a pair of black stiletto and bold red lips. As I walked down the grand staircase, the sound of my heels echoed against the marble floor. When I reached the bottom step, I saw Claire in the distance, near the outdoor patio, holding court among her friends. The party was grander than she had let on. Crystal glasses sparkled in the golden light, and the tables were adorned with expensive linens. A jazz band played softly by the gazebo. Lanterns and fairy lights had been strung across the garden, creating a romantic, enchanting ambience. It was spectacular. It was my house. And I was going to reclaim it. As I stepped onto the patio, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The subtle clinking of glasses and casual conversation faltered for the briefest of moments as people glanced toward me. I didn't say a word at first. I simply walked through the crowd with practiced grace, smiling softly at the guests, acknowledging some by name. The band's melody seemed to soften as I moved, as though the world itself were accommodating my presence. And then I saw her, Claire. She was holding a flute of champagne, laughing with a group of impeccably dressed guests. Her golden hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and her silk gown clung to her figure like it was tailored specifically for this night. Her eyes met mine from across the patio. For a moment, she froze, her smile faltering ever so slightly. I strolled toward her casually, taking my time, enjoying the slight panic that flashed across her face. "Rachel," she greeted me, her voice stiff with forced pleasantness. "I didn't realize you were joining us tonight." Her words were carefully measured. But I could see it, the irritation in her eyes, the thinly veiled displeasure. She hadn't expected me to show up. She had made sure of it. I smiled sweetly, my eyes narrowing just slightly. "Oh, Claire, dear," I said softly, reaching for a flute of champagne from a passing server. I brought the glass to my lips, letting the sweetness coat my tongue before I added, "I just couldn't miss the party you arranged in my house." I emphasized the last two words just enough for those nearby to catch the underlying sting. Her eyes widened slightly, and I could see the tension in her posture. She let out a forced chuckle, pretending not to be fazed, but the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her discomfort. The crowd was starting to take notice. The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance, with each step I took reclaiming more of the space that Claire had dared to treat as her own. I moved through the party with graceful confidence, making sure that no one, not Claire, not Daniel, not a single guest, could ignore my presence. As I glided through the crowd, the subtle power shift was palpable. The guests were drawn to me as though I was the natural center of gravity, despite Claire's best efforts to hold court. The candlelit garden, which moments before had been her kingdom, was quickly becoming my stage. I began by casually inserting myself into conversations, effortlessly turning them toward me. As I walked past a group of women admiring the flower arrangements, I smiled warmly and interjected, "Oh, I'm so glad you like the hydrangeas. They came in fresh from the floral shop on Elm Street. I've been using them for years." One of the women turned to me with a delighted expression. "You chose these? They're stunning." I smiled graciously, allowing a touch of faux modesty to slip into my tone. "Oh yes, I have a fondness for hydrangeas in the summer. They brighten up the garden so beautifully." Claire, who had been speaking to the same group moments before, stiffened slightly. Her smile froze as she realized that I had effortlessly stolen the spotlight. The admiration she had hoped to receive was now directed at me, but I didn't stop there. When I walked by the catering table, I noticed a tray of hors d'oeuvres sitting half empty. The staff were hesitating, unsure whether to refill it yet. Without a second thought, I signaled the head server over with a simple tilt of my head. "It's best if the trays remain full," I said smoothly, my tone steady and assured. "We wouldn't want the guests to think we're running low." The server nodded immediately, hastily directing the catering team to replenish the platters. From the corner of my eye, I saw Claire watching. Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute as she witnessed the staff taking their cues from me, the woman she had attempted to cast aside. As the evening wore on, the guests gravitated toward me like moths to a flame. The younger women complimented my taste, the older couples praised the ambience of the house. And several of Daniel's colleagues eagerly shook my hand, clearly mistaking me for the official hostess of the evening. One of the male guests, a distinguished gentleman with silver hair, approached me with a gracious smile. "Rachel, you've outdone yourself," he said, his voice dripping with admiration. "This is one of the most elegant events I've been to in years." I smiled, letting my eyes briefly flicker toward Claire, who was standing nearby, her nails biting into the stem of her glass. "Oh, it was nothing," I replied smoothly, deliberately underplaying my role while still taking full credit. "I do love hosting a beautiful event." The man chuckled warmly, clearly impressed. He took my hand lightly and kissed it, murmuring, "A woman of true grace." Claire's lips pressed into a thin, brittle line. I could feel the weight of her fury, the heat of her barely concealed humiliation. She tried to pretend she didn't care, but the slight tremor in her hand as she sipped her drink betrayed her. As the evening grew livelier, I didn't miss a single chance to assert my authority. When I noticed one of the staff struggling to adjust the outdoor lanterns, I casually walked over and helped, guiding the placement to create a softer, more flattering glow. The guests noticed immediately, commenting on how lovely the lighting was. When the jazz band switched to a slower, more somber tune, I subtly signaled the lead musician with a small nod, and he instantly shifted to a livelier, more elegant melody. Claire shot me a sharp glance across the patio, realizing that I was subtly orchestrating the entire event from behind the scenes. And her control was slipping through her manicured fingers. The party was reaching its peak. The garden was aglow with lanterns, and the mingling voices of the guests created a gentle hum of warmth. Laughter spilled through the patio doors as people toasted, danced, and chatted over glasses of wine. It was the perfect moment for the final blow. As I strolled through the crowd, I could feel Claire's eyes on me. She was watching my every move, growing more agitated by the second. Her carefully curated evening was unraveling before her eyes, and she was powerless to stop it. I knew I could finish her with just a few words. So, I waited until the party was at its most joyful and carefree before I made my move. I walked toward the gazebo, where the jazz band was playing softly. With a slight gesture, I motioned for the musicians to pause. The music stopped, and the crowd's attention slowly turned toward me. I raised my glass, my voice warm and graceful, with just the right amount of authority. "I just want to take a moment to thank you all for being here tonight," I began smoothly, my eyes sweeping over the guests. "It's always such a joy to open my home to wonderful friends and family." I deliberately emphasized the words "my home." From across the crowd, I saw Claire's face tighten. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. She knew exactly what I was doing. And of course, I continued, flashing her a saccharine smile, "I must give special thanks to my lovely daughter-in-law, Claire, for organizing such a beautiful evening." There was a slight pause. I held her gaze steadily, making sure she caught the condescension laced into my praise. Then, I added with a light, graceful chuckle, "Hosting in my home, of course, makes it all the more special." There it was. The entire crowd erupted into applause. To the oblivious guests, it was a gracious compliment. But Claire knew it was a dagger. The clinking of glasses and the cheers from the crowd were nothing compared to the sight of Claire's face draining of color. Her grip on her champagne flute was so tight that her knuckles were bone white. She had no response. No retort. No charming comeback. I had done it. I had publicly and elegantly put her in her place. For the rest of the evening, Claire was visibly rattled. She smiled through gritted teeth and made small talk with guests, but her eyes were distant, her expression stiff. Her movements were slightly jerky, her graceful composure slipping away with every passing moment. She avoided me. When I crossed the patio, she slipped away toward the garden. When I approached a group she was speaking with, she suddenly remembered she had to check on something and walked off. The guests noticed. They might not have understood the full dynamic at play, but they could sense the shift. More and more of them began gravitating toward me, offering compliments and striking up conversations. Claire, once the intended centerpiece of the evening, was reduced to a background figure, an afterthought. The party eventually wound down, and the last of the guests trickled out into the night. The garden lights dimmed, and the once lively hum faded into the quiet of the evening. I remained by the patio doors, watching as the catering staff cleared the last of the glasses and the band packed their instruments. Claire lingered by the pool, alone, swirling the last dregs of wine in her glass. Her face was tight, her lips drawn into a bitter line. I walked over to her slowly, deliberately. When I reached her, she didn't look at me right away. She stared into the water, her expression stony. Lovely evening, wasn't it? I said softly, my voice light but laced with victory. Her jaw clenched slightly. She slowly turned to face me, her eyes narrowed with thinly veiled fury. For a brief moment, she opened her mouth as though she was about to retort, but then she stopped. She knew she had lost. Instead, she simply lifted her chin ever so slightly, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. But her voice was low when she muttered through gritted teeth, "This isn't over." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, darling," I replied, my tone saccharine, "I'm afraid it is. You see, in my house, it always is." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her fuming in the shadow of my home.